what I'm going to run through is basically the work that we've been doing, who I am, and a little bit about what success looks like. I mentioned it earlier. But then the example of what the work that we've been doing around what it takes to turn data into a business. Now that's very specific to spending data. So, you know, I will accept that other people's experiences will be different. But then also, what do businesses like mine bring to the party? How do we bring benefits? And I think it's really, really important to see commerce as part of the story of potential success. So I'm going to run through those. First of all, so who am I? My stock phrase when I meet someone in government is, I know more about how you spend your money than you do. It always gets their attention, and then they always say, no, that can't be true. But it is, because certainly in the UK, some central government doesn't know what local government spends. And bits of local government don't know what other bits of local government spend, and no one knows what the NHS spends. So by bringing all of that data together, I can say that we know more about government spending than government does. And this is how we do it. We take all of the CSV files and we bring them together, and then we publish it openly for anyone to be able to go and see. And not only that, we link it to companies' house data, so we've got a register of companies in there as well. And we're doing a lot of work with tenders as well, so that we're trying to link who won which tender, who issued tenders, and which suppliers won it. It's very difficult with the European Union tender data. If anyone's seen it, it's leaves a bit to be desired. What does success look like? Well, I mentioned it earlier, but it's the persistent use of open data to make decisions. I left commercial out of that. I don't think it's about commerce. It's about data becoming ubiquitous in the way that we run our businesses, or the way that our government makes decisions, or in the way that my mother gets her bus. It doesn't have to be big and hairy decisions. It can be very small decisions. It can be decisions about whether I go to one supermarket or another, where I park my car. But it's the success, success is about using it, and using it in a meaningful way. So, with our data, I'm going to show you some examples of the sorts of things that we've been able to achieve so far, and I think we're only scratching the surface. But, for example, this is an arc of spending with SMEs across central government in the UK. It's with small businesses. It's varying a lot, and it's hard to know where the pattern is, but it's not looking promising. This is an example from a council, and I don't know if you can see this yellow line here. That was their budget. That's what they should have been spending. In July last year, they went public and said, "We've run out of money. It's not our fault. It's austerity. It's the Tories and the cuts. It's awful, and people will die because of it." And so we then published this, which showed that they've been routinely spending over their budget for a persistent period of at least 2 years. In fact, in the graph, they only spent below their budget 5 times. So you can see that this is the sort of opportunity that open data creates, so spending data. We're also getting it to monitor supplier performance. This is 4 businesses under the Capita Group, and we can see that one of them is earning nearly £45 million a month from UK government. Now, no one knew how much that figure was until we'd done our research, because this combines local and central government data. And there's no aggregation across central and local government when they're negotiating with a supplier. Here's another one. I'm sorry, these figures aren't showing very well, but this is the category of temporary staff in London, and you can see that one supplier has got 38% of the market, and where their rivals are, what's happening. We can monitor that over time. This might be interesting to you. This is the tender performance. How many days it takes to issue a tender in the EU across different countries. So in Greece it takes longer than anywhere else. So currently in Greece, if you issue a tender on January the 1st, it will be awarded on the 12th of December. So that's how long you have to wait for your tender award. Unfortunately, the United Kingdom isn't that much better. If you issue a tender in the UK on January the 1st, it will take until August to get your award through. I've got the Netherlands down there, so you're pretty much on average there in the Netherlands. With Germany as well, about 119 days. And that's the example of what happens when you take open data and you drive it through a process of analysis. You start to get information out. The problem is the work that's required to do that. So this is our ideal financial model. This is the bit that we are trying to achieve in the UK and elsewhere, is to link all of those data sets. Now, that's a really difficult thing to do when they're not published. So we can never, if we ever get to that, even in the UK, I'll be amazed, but let alone elsewhere. It's going to be a very hard task, but we know that's what we need to do. So in order to get our product going, we realised that we needed a register of government entities, an index with all of the different local authorities and all of the different central departments and then the universities, NHS Trust. And we discovered that one doesn't exist. There's no single unique reference for all of these entities with a single unique identifier. So we had to build one. And we're not sure enough of its quality, so we haven't made it open, but we're working possibly with Chris at Open Corporates to do that. We've also used company register, so we use Chris at Open Corporates, and we know we need to link that to that area, to the contracts, transactions, and receipts. And just going back, the reason why we can't link it up here is because there's no company data associated with that. It's only after you've awarded a tender that a company is relevant to this data. So I call this my teapot diagram, and you can see this is, when you've got that in place, you can know who bought what from who, which is great. It's going to be hard work. But then you've got to categorize it as well. So it's no good saying, okay, government bought this much from PwC or from Deloitte. They need to know whether it was in audit fees or whether it was in IT consulting. And so we've got that challenge as well. And even when you've got there, we experience this problem. Can anyone see the anomaly in the chart here? So this is the data we received, and this is going back to your point. So this is that's two transactions for 198 million and 148 million and 144 million or something like that to a legal recruitment firm. Now I know it's wrong, you know it's wrong, but they've published that data. What can I do? I can only represent what they've said to us. I've actually had to go back to them and say, can you publish the right data? And they're still thinking about it. So that's a far more dangerous, because that affects my product. That makes my product look rubbish. The fact that we're open about it, I think, helps, because we can say, look, we've tried to solve it. But it's a lot more work to take out all of these anomalies. So where are we in the UK? We get budgets, but they appear in PDF. We don't get project data really. We do get a lot of tender data, but it's very varied. In the UK, we identified 2,000 different domain addresses advertising tender portals. So if you want to submit to UK public sector, there are 2,000 different tender portals to use. Contracts, we don't get good data on contracts. It's very inconsistent. And we do get transactions. We don't get receipts. Transactions is typically okay data, but it's messy. So that's as far as we've got. And we've got so much further to go. We've got a long way to go. So the question really is, what do open data businesses bring to the party? Why is commerce the answer? Because I think there will be plenty of people who would say, well, actually, government's the answer. Government needs to produce better data and make it available, and then it's cheaper to do it, and it's easier. Or maybe it's big business. Maybe government needs to just issue some contracts to Capgemini or PwC and get the services we want delivered through that. I personally think that the answer is entrepreneurs. Funny that. But I'll run through why I think that. So I want you to think about this as a process. So we go through this process, and we iteratively go through this process. We gather, clean, link, verify, and then publish. Now I'd like you to think about, for example, what happens when you give that task to a group of hackers. They're actually really quick up the steps, first time. When you get a hacking, when you set up a hack day, you look at the potential, they will do something amazing. 24 hours, they'll probably do a load of data that took us years to do. The problem is, they then go back to their day jobs. So they can't iterate over that loop. So we know that sort of hot spotting of technical talent is really good for coming up with ideas, but it's no good for delivering a consistent product. What happens when you get something like a voluntary group, or a charity working in this? Something like the Open Knowledge Foundation is a really, really good example. They do amazing work, but their funding can be inconsistent and insecure. That can cause problems as well. They're probably better at this than anyone else in many ways. So I wouldn't wish to denigrate what they do, but still they struggle to iterate because the data changes. The boring bits require employees and infrastructure and commitment, and they're usually concerned with the bigger picture. What about government going around this loop? How do you think government works with this loop? Well, they'll have a few meetings, and then 6 months later they'll have gathered the data, but via edict. They'll employ someone to clean the data, but then the problem comes with linking. So if you link data in government, you might take another bit of data and you link it together and publish it, and then someone will come up with a conclusion from that. And then there'll be a row, and they'll take it down. Because this is what happened. So we did this piece of research. We took all of the local authorities in the UK, and we identified the proportion of their spend with small businesses. We published it. And we said, these are the top 5, and these are the bottom 5. And then this happened. Your research is flawed. So if you imagine that government had done that, so if one bit of government had published a bit of data about another bit of government, everyone gets really irritated, everyone gets really upset. So this is the councillor who accused our data, our research of being open source research. I suspect his website was hosted on a Linux box, but I don't really want to. So He said he damned us and said it was absolutely disgusting research, it should never have been allowed, and it uses inaccurate, and it's wholly flawed. And meanwhile, when we said, well, look, okay, we think you're wrong, but what he goes, and later on in the article, he goes on to describe how much spending is going to big businesses, and then from those big businesses on to small businesses. We said, that's great. How much? He couldn't tell us. So, if he can't know. But that's illustrative of what happens when you publish research. So people get, if you use the data properly, you can lose friends as well. I will never be doing any business at Sheffield Council, I can tell you. If I go back to this loop, what happens if you throw that at big business? They're great, they get straight up there. They've got the resources. If you pay for them to do it, even better. And they'll iterate around that loop as long as you pay them to do it, but it's expensive. Because they're not caring about the data, they care about the profit, the process of doing that. If you give it to them on their own and you say, right, go through that loop. I know that big business already have installations of all of the data that we already use. But they just won't make it open. They use it internally. They're not interested in sharing it. So we end up with well, actually I should have gone to this. And go back to that slide. And this is basically saying, well, look, actually, if you want short-term investment and fast innovation, I think your best bet is a startup in this area. You cannot expect government to do anything fast. They know that, everyone knows that. But you also need long-term investment to continually improve the data. Can anyone spot the flaw in my argument? The flaw is that startups go bust. There's no guarantee that my business or any of the other open data businesses at the ODI or anywhere else in Europe will succeed. So that little quadrant is fizzing away and they disappear like stars, And the challenge is, how does government get money from up there in a successful way? I think we just have to accept risk. Here's another bit of the problem, is that the data that we use, most of it was published in 2009. Started being published in 2009. We waited 2 years for someone to do something with that data. Now, usually, you have the insecurity comes from either the data disappearing. So I'm not going to build a business on something that's not going to be there in the future. So it took me 2 years to be sure that it was going to be there. But also, what tends to happen is the government comes along and goes, right, we're going to spend a lot of money and we're going to make it better. Which is fine. That's fine. But that can also put you off because you don't want to compete against government. So you have to have a sort of a calming period where you can see a status quo appear. And that's when you can invest. And that's unfortunately why it takes time, because you have to be certain that you're going to get the data you need. We were 2 years in development. I say we weren't working on that. I was running a business at the same time. So this was a background project to begin with. And in late 2012, 2013, we launched our product. So it is basically taken it took 4 years to get to a product. And even then, our product wasn't as good as it could have been. We've been improving it steadily. So if I come back to here, this might be a bit unfair, because if you buy large, if you're prepared to pay for large business, they'll drive up to there, but when you turn off the money, they'll stop. And that can be a real problem. And I think that it's a challenge. There is no easy answer, but if you want data to get used, you need products that come out of it. If you want products to come out of it, you need entrepreneurs. That's my final conclusion. conclusion is that if when you get an open data entrepreneur, you do get investment, you do get commitment, but also you get the validation and the insight. And that's critical. If I go back to that Cheshire's chart with that large bar, that anomaly, no one would have noticed it unless we had published that site. And now they're going to get it right, because I'm going to FOI them until they get it right. And we're going to have clean and better data. And that's the result of running a business. It's not out of an altruistic interest to make sure that Cheshire's publish the right data. It's about my product being good, my product being dependable. And that's the relationship that needs to occur. The other thing you get is economic growth and new jobs. We're less likely to outsource all of our work to the Far East as well, unlike some bigger businesses. So, government has to be patient, it takes time. Follow the ODI model for incubation, run innovation competitions, seed fund for specific outputs, and be glad for businesses to get rich from open data. I think the example from this morning from the UK and from Austria seems to be that there was a sort of sense of avarice, or we cannot allow for a businessman to get rich using our data. If you have that attitude, open data will not succeed in your country. You have to be prepared to let someone get rich. If you're not, that's enough. I should add also, be ready for people to fail, because some of us will. That's me.